Spencer and I are going to talk you through our rebrand, rebuild, and reboot, future-proofing Nielsen.com. So we'll do a quick intro, and then we're going to talk in two parts. First, our digital strategy, and then we'll go through future-proofing our WordPress environment. Quick intro, my name is Katie Olson. I am overseeing digital strategy here at Nielsen.
My name is Spencer. I'm senior web developer at Nielsen.
Yeah. And so a little bit about Nielsen as we get started. So Nielsen is shaping the world's media and content through measurement, data, and analytics. And so I figured we'd break that down into some data points, since that's what we do. So we provide data and analytics to brands, agencies, and media sellers in more than 55 countries. And the data that we provide to these various brands, agencies, and media sellers is what fuels the sort of exchange of advertising and content. And that's like a more than $1 trillion marketplace. So how did we go about sort of future-proofing our digital strategy? And it started with a rebrand. So 2021 was a big year for us. Not only was it a pandemic, but we also ended up selling about half of our business, which was a CPG-focused business, and we became a 100% media-focused business, which was great. We were able to focus in on a more defined client base. But we then quickly followed with a rebrand just 6 months later in October. And so as the rebrand was approaching, we knew that we wanted to make some pretty big changes to our website, and we wrapped up some pretty big technical changes into this rebrand. We knew we wanted to move from a sort of more Nielsen-centric, internally focused approach to a more customer-first approach. We had more than 50 websites around the world representing each of the countries that we were in, and we wanted to move to a more global, multilingual experience. And we also had a split between B2B and B2C. While our main business is B2B, a lot of the data we collect is through a B2C panel experience, and we needed to really focus in on one audience rather than splitting across two. And so that took us into rebuilding and reducing. And so this is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Winchester Mansion in California, but it was built by the heiress of the Winchester gun fortune, I think. And it's this crazy mansion. It has like 24,000 square feet house, and it's got 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens. It's excessive in all ways. And our website wasn't that bad, I'm exaggerating a little, but we had a very complicated back end. We had just gone through the split. We had sections of the site that were no longer relevant. Also, we had built our website in 2019, so we had done a migration from Adobe to WordPress in 2019, and we were right at the cusp of when Gutenberg was being built, so we fortunately made the decision to dive straight in at that time, but it meant we were also building alongside Gutenberg, so we had a lot of custom work on our site that every time Gutenberg got upgraded, we suddenly had a lot of changes that had to be made. So we had custom work, we had old branding, we had outdated content, and we had these 50 country websites that we wanted to clean house. So we took a bit of a multi-phased approach. We had this really immovable deadline of October that we had to hit, and so we focused on the most important things we had to hit. So we started with our brand and user experience to make sure that that was all mapped out, and we had a solid foundation. We also had a solid foundation technically, and we made sure that we were focusing on redirects and our search to make sure we didn't lose any equity as we made these changes. As part of that change, we actually built our new site on a subdomain with the old site still running, and we're moving people sort of somewhat seamlessly in between the two experiences. We took the next phase where we added automated translations in 11 different languages with a tool called Weglot. We also started using the Gutenberg templates and built those to allow us to create content a little bit easier. And we focused on some wins with new product pages and key pages, basically. The final phase we finished up in July of this year, and we were just doing a ton of work. We did a site audit of the entire site, deciding what we were going to migrate. We did some of it With manual production, we did, Spencer led a very large amount of data mapping and content migration. We got rid of a lot of content. We also did our GA3 implementation, a lot of production work and more redirects and lots of testing. And so that brings us to the new website. And so I like to think of our new website as this clean, simple, beautiful, modern home. The great news is we delivered on all our initial goals. So we have our new brand and identity as this media-focused business showcased in a more customer-centric way. We also highlight Nielsen's global capabilities with automatic translations in 11 key languages. We improved the user experience. We are now focused on entirely on B2B. Our B2C has been moved to a separate website experience, which we launched simultaneously. And we also increased performance by removing about, in some sections of our website, 50% of our content. We also created scale with more standard components, and we enhanced our tracking. And so this is a little bit more of sort of how it turned out. Like I said, we do have the separate B2C site that we launched at the same time, and we improved, sort of our international presence, our tracking, and our SEO and usability. So I'm going to pass it over to Spencer, and he's going to walk you through some of the more technical stuff.
Going to do kind of like a little bit more of a deeper dive. So the goals really reflect what Katie was talking about. We have all these R's, where by reducing the amount of maintenance work we were doing, we could rebuild for reusability, reliability, and a more kind of like robust platform. We launched with this microsite, and we really wanted to use this as an opportunity to build like a new foundation for Nielsen. And we only had a couple months to do it. We did a different stack on the front end, where we went with Tailwinds and Alpine.js and less jQuery. We still have some, but maybe someday we're working towards it. A big question for us was like how much to lean in to kind of like new full site editing and like theme.json. At the last minute, we kind of like pivoted and we're like, we can do it, and like the win is there and it's worth it. A big part of that was if you're working in the block editor and using the core blocks, you know that core is pretty opinionated and kind of like inserting a lot of CSS in line or also in external style sheets. And so part of that was figuring out all of these hooks to either remove inline styles or DQ external style sheets. At the same time, though, it was pretty easy, just kind of copying what was in the WordPress repo and maybe like removing all the important flags. Just doing a find all delete on that, but otherwise exactly what's in core. And so the big goal here is just to keep the core. And that kind of comes back to this rebuild and reduce of just really leaning on core and other like widely used third-party plugins. So like previously, we still have an in-house block plugin, but almost everything was in-house, from like headings to container, and instead just really doing core blocks. We also used to have an in-house SEO, an in-house internationalization and like translation system, which included some URL routing with mixed taxonomies. And so this was very difficult to maintain, and like on a WordPress upgrade was sometimes being multiple sprints and like a lot of time and effort going into just doing an upgrade. We really wanted to keep the core. At the same time, of course, we need to meet our exact brand guidelines. So we're doing block filters. We're kind of composing blocks out of core blocks by using inner blocks and the block templates. And then I think the really key part is that third point about using the server-side render block filter, where we can server-side, we can have like a simple block in JavaScript, but then using that filter in the PHP, you can add Alpine.js attributes or the Tailwinds classes to really deliver that brand experience. And then finally, I think block patterns are just really great, and they work really well with Tailwinds. I had a little video here, but I don't think it's going to work. But basically, I just want to show the editor, where it's just like, it is basically core with some block filters. What's really neat, though, with Tailwinds is in the editor, you can put in the Tailwinds classes. You can see the editor, live reflecting the classes because they're, queued in the editor as well. And so you can do pretty dramatic things, like even on a list block, you could, add some flex classes. You can, add all the kind of mobile hover, Tailwinds modifications. And so we're doing that with, sections and a query block. And what's most powerful is you can just copy all that, paste it into a text editor, commit it to the repo as a block pattern, and then any editor can insert it. And you can kind of get this like live preview as you're designing the new section. And so we're just about to like roll out using the new query block and the like template. We're just about to like roll that out, and I think it's worked out pretty well. Oh, there's the video, but I don't think it's going to play. So, but yeah, so the reboot. So we had the kind of like new environment, and then the problem was is we still had the 2 sites, and we had to get some of the old posts into the new site. From the original migration, we still had a lot of junk from Adobe CQ, some like disabled blocks, and so yeah, there was a lot to work through there. I just measured it for this talk, and the old database was 1,021% larger than the new database. So that's a gain. However, there were like still quite a bit of conversions. Like within the post, we're mapping colors to like the new brand colors, like the padding, font sizes. We're mapping, we're transforming in-house blocks to the core blocks. And then originally in the old site, we had a lot of ACF doing all sorts of stuff. And everything kind of like on the post level was ACF. And so we're doing block theme now, so we had to convert that into blocks. So a lot of conversions. And we did it all through WordPress command line. Wanted to keep it like somewhat functional. So basically a JSON, like a giant JSON file to kind of define the transformations. And then really broadly speaking, WordPress core has the functions, parse blocks to get the block object, do the work on the block, and then serialize it and put it back in the post. The image there is just kind of like a little snippet of the JSON file. We're converting like a original Nielsen heading block to a core heading block and mapping the original colors to the new kind of more generic standard core like color classes. And then on the template post level, that was less functional, but so we're just really building blocks in the ground up there and really just we're reading post meta and we're building a new block. And so yeah, how it turned out, for me, the focus really is on that third column of future-proofing, where, as mentioned, like the WordPress upgrades would sometimes be really onerous and spread over multiple sprints. With 6.1, we're currently doing the QA, and it looks like we're going to have 1 ticket related to the button CSS, and that's it. And with PHP 8, we had 0 tickets. And I think, moreover, we've got like a flexible platform where we can just more easily extend it over like microsites or new features for Nielsen.com. And that means on the feature side, we can like really focus on some of those features. So like we're rolling out a much more dynamic, better search. And yeah, it gives us more time to deliver. And so thank you. That's.
This was great, really impressive. Any questions?
I'll go ahead. From the engineering perspective, what was the biggest pain in the ass?
I mean, definitely the migration stuff. I don't know even. I mean, it's just kind of like, and this isn't even block editors, post ID clashing stuff. And how do you merge 2 live sites when you have all different types of like post sites and images and stuff.
Thanks, Christina. So now we can hear me, yes? The decision to roll the new site on the subdomain while keeping the original site live, was that the only option you considered? Were there other options? What were the pros and cons? What were the challenges?
We spent a lot of time talking about that, and we walked through a lot of pros and cons. I think the October deadline that we had to hit was immovable, and that was the thing that we really faced. That we could not move the amount of I mean, even with cutting down the site is still very large. It's a large company, and we're doing a lot of stuff on it. We have a lot of content in particular that we knew we had to move. And so in order to hit the deadlines, the company had just been through, I mean, it was a big split. We lost large parts of our team, and the marketing organization was left in various states of hiring and stuff like that. And so it just wasn't something that we'd be able to lift and shift as quickly as we wanted to with all of the changes that we wanted to make. And so that was really why we decided on the phased approach, and the way that we thought that that was most feasible. And I don't know if you want to add to it from a technical perspective, but being able to keep all of the content up and live and running while also having this new brand look and feel, that was the path we felt was most feasible to get us to that October deadline. So we did end up we left the old site live. We did end up doing a light sort of reskim of it. So we changed the colors and the fonts and made a few tweaks to it to make it feel a little less janky. It definitely was not the most seamless interaction. I'd say people within our company definitely felt it the most, but you were bouncing back and forth between the two sites, and then we used sort of the additional time to make strategic decisions around what we wanted to move and how we wanted that to look and sound like, and then do that last big shift of all that data. So we did even the data we did in phases, and so.
You probably addressed this, but how long did this project take, start to kind of finish, knowing that I'm sure it's ongoing, but?
We started talking about it, I'd say, in the spring after the split, and then sort of it finished up in July, so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess slightly over a year, but I'd say the development work didn't start until closer
July.
to,
August.
July.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah, so about a year from the development work.
Had the split not happened, would you still have gone through this migration?
Would I still,
was the split the genesis for why you had to?
I think the split and the rebrand was what allowed us to make the technical changes. I think it was stuff that we had, Spencer and I have both been at the company for quite a while and had felt needed to be done for a while. I think it allowed us the room from like a leadership perspective to be able to make such extensive changes. But we rebuilt the whole thing basically. It's a whole new website and experience, and I think we learned a lot from having started in Gutenberg back in 2019. So we knew we liked Gutenberg. We had everyone bought into that. It was just the sort of how to make it better based on our learnings from using it for about 2 years at that point.
Yeah, so I love the Alpine and Tailwind choices there. I was curious, what are you still doing in jQuery? Like, what was the decision to stay partially in jQuery, and why? What components are still working in jQuery?
Yeah, I would love to drop jQuery, and when you look at the core vitals and stuff, and I wish I could just control that. So from a business perspective, we're using Ninja Forms, and so that's a requirement, or that's dependent on jQuery. And then there's some scripts on our end, which we could refactor. And I think if we actually could drop Ninja Forms, then it would be like, okay, we should refactor these into vanilla JavaScript and drop it. But as long as we have Ninja Forms, there's less. Going forward, we're trying to do new stuff. Not jQuery, but I don't know if it's actually, you can make the case that we need to spend time refactoring.
Yeah, interesting. Is that like validation, like field validation or something, or what are they? I'm not super familiar with Ninja Forms. What are they using the jQuery for?
They have a bunch of
Ajax submits and stuff.
Yeah, it's a total form builder solution. So you fill out you do one drop down and more fields pop up, and so they're using it and in validation, and so they're definitely using it.
Is it just in the admin, or are you using it on your front end as well?
Oh, on the front end.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I like the Alpine and Tailwind choice though. That's cool.
Yeah, no, I think also with the full site editing, in the back of my mind, it was like, is this a good choice? I don't know, but let's see. And I think in hindsight, it was a good choice, both the Tailwinds, Alpine, and really the test will be a year from now. But yeah, I think all of that will stand.
Cool.
I'm wondering, how you found that kind of mass conversion process of old blocks, and if there was kind of classic content in there. Did you have people kind of eyeball that before saying this is good to go, or did you kind of just trust that kind of mass parsing and serialization process?
I think mostly we trusted it. I mean, there was some QA process and we identified something. So, some of our original custom blocks, accordions and stuff like that. And it's just the automatic parsing, developing that is going to be too time consuming. And there's a lot to get lost there. So we just did that as manual production. But other things like headings and stuff like that, we had a pretty robust automated system. And I think that did work. I haven't heard of any.
You guys spent a lot of
issues
time
with
on
that.
the mapping, and we did do some tests with the help of WordPress, and we did do QA testing. But I mean, for the most part, it went from one live environment to another. So
to clarify, that wasn't just simply copy post content, parse it into blocks and serialize it. You guys wrote a bunch of kind of conditions to check for attributes and change the things like that, or?
Yeah, so there was basically a giant conversion script, and then there was just a bunch of functions, and then a JSON file that defines, that would convert different attributes to different attributes. And of course, some of that, we had, our own blocks that had different attribute names that are, of course, different than core. So yeah, a fair amount of conversions and mapping specific colors to specific colors. So yeah, it was definitely a mapping conversion system.
We had a period where it was moved but not live. So that helped from a QA perspective. So we did do some checking and making sure that, and there were a few things that maybe hadn't mapped 100%, but we were able to fix them within the same week.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Katie and Spencer. And